Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today I have with me Patrick Nelson. Patrick has gained both local and national accolades for his military service, academic career, and work as a professional speaker and trainer, including being named the inaugural NFL Tillman Military Scholar. He is an experienced leader that spent nearly 7 years in the U.S. Army as a paratrooper and completed 3 combat deployments leading soldiers. His military awards include the Bronze Star Medal and the Purple Heart Medal. He is the author of Frontline Leadership: How to Eliminate Complacency and Build All-in Engagement. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for your service, Patrick.
Thanks, Andrea. Excited to be here.
So you just came out with this book at the time of this recording. It's been out a week. How are things going? Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm very excited, especially because I have to admit I don't like writing. It was a labor of love for me. I thought my writing career was sort of behind me as far as in academia. And so it was a labor of love, but it was a journey that I'm glad that I did. And it was one of those moments where you kind of got to force yourself to do something that you don't just like doing all the time. And I'm not saying don't buy the book because I'm a bad writer. I think the book is really
No,
great, of
it's good.
course.
Yeah.
I just don't like writing. That's just not my thing. I mean, everybody has their own thing. I like talking. Talking is my big thing. But a lot of people always, after speaking events, come to me and say, "Hey, where can I buy your book? I want to hear more of these stories." And finally it happened. And so the book is there, and everything has just gone great with the launch.
That's awesome. You got to give them what they want.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, you are a speaker and you often speak about leading by example to improve engagement with things like safety requirements. And I'm curious if you want to tell us about why and how that topic became so important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd probably say right now about 60% of my work is kind of that safety leadership focus. Workplace safety. I'm not, first of all, I'm not an OSHA type safety person. I can't talk to people about the technical aspects of safety because I don't know any of it. I
Yeah.
look at it from a leadership standpoint.
Yeah.
And, the other 40% is more of the general leadership focus, being able to lead through influence. And all of this really came about because of an incident during my time in the Army. So on June 8th, 2005, I was on my second deployment, my first one to Afghanistan. I'd already done 12 months in Iraq.
Mhm.
We were getting resupplied with a Chinook helicopter, bringing us some new ammunition. We're at a small forward operating base near the Pakistani border, sort of tip of the spear, end of the line type place. And, resupplies were something we were pretty used to doing. And right before we rolled out to the landing zone where the helicopter was going to land and we were going to unload the helicopter, my soldier had hopped in the back of the Humvee to go out there. Now, that wasn't his duty for at the time. He was supposed to be doing something else. And so I turned around and, I was going to chew into his butt a little bit and say, "Get out of here." But then I thought, you know what? I value that kind of work ethic in my soldiers. Like, this young kid wants to come lift some heavy boxes and help out the team. Like, I know where he's supposed to be. Like, they'll be just fine without him. So it's not a big deal. But as I was turning back around out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that he didn't have his helmet on. So I literally opened my mouth to yell at him. Of course, I realized I don't have mine on either. It's obviously kind of hard for me to say something if I'm not doing the right thing. So I didn't say anything. The helicopter landed. Group of 10 of us stepped over to the side of the aircraft so they could, sort of clear the ramp and we could start unloading it. And the next thing I know, everything just went dark. And I was just laying on the ground. I was disoriented, couldn't hear anything. And sort of my first thought is, just kind of one of the guys came up behind me, shoulders horsing around, something like that. But then I opened my eyes and I looked up and there's just bodies and blood all over the ground. And, quickly realized it was a rocket that landed next to us as more of them started impacting all around. And unfortunately, my soldier, Emmanuel Hernandez, took shrapnel through his head and was killed.
Hmm.
He was the soldier that I almost told to put on his helmet.
Mm.
And, I was peppered in the back with some shrapnel myself, small holes, nothing too serious at all. Very, very minor wounds compared to everybody else. And it was one of those situations where if I would have spoke up, if I would have been doing the right thing myself,
Mm.
Emmanuel may still be alive. We don't know 100% sure, but I certainly like his odds a lot better with that helmet on.
Mm.
And I beat myself up for a long time after that incident. I tried to drink my problems away, tried to
Yeah.
wash them away with pills. I was addicted to Vicodin and morphine for 5 years.
Wow.
It's a miracle that I survived that. Of course, none of that works. I mean, those things only serve as accelerants for challenges I was already facing. But thankfully, as your question alluded to, I've learned I can take that story, I can inspire others, and I can influence the future.
Mm. Wow. I'm glad that that has turned into something that you can use and that other people can benefit from. And I'm sure a lot of people have benefited from that and been inspired to do what's right and to not just do what's right, but like follow their training, follow your example of saying you need to do what you're supposed to do and then lead by that example. But also the speaking up piece is interesting because it's hard sometimes to, I guess, hold people accountable or speak up when you think it's not that big of a deal. Is it really something that I need to get on somebody about? What are your thoughts about that at this point?
Yeah, well, especially when it comes to safety, it's one of those situations where we've done it like that 100 times before and nothing's ever happened. And
Right.
it's such a cliche. It's that 1 in a million chance, but bad things happen. I often use this analogy. I ask people, say, has ever bought a lottery ticket like a Powerball or Mega Millions? Most people raise their hand. And I say, look, you bought that ticket knowing the chances you winning the jackpot are what? Astronomical, slim to none. But you got that tiny sliver of belief, maybe, just maybe, it might be you. And if we have that attitude towards winning the lottery, you better have that attitude towards your safety at work because chances of you getting hurt at work are a heck of a lot higher than you winning the lottery.
Right.
And if you keep doing things, the wrong things, even though we've done it like that 100 times before and nothing's ever happened, eventually, your luck is going to run out just like ours did. And you're going to find out the hard way. And really my purpose is hopefully preventing people from finding out the hard way. I really understand after years of doing this the power of our stories, and so especially when it comes to safety I really encourage equipping people with their own what I call a safety stump speech, their sort of brief yet personal connection on why safety matters to them.
Hmm.
We 3 months 3 years down the road, we don't remember every single word somebody said, but we remember how they make us feel.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of positive that I've seen come from that, especially from safety, because again, a lot of it really is if somebody just spoke up. You look at investigations from safety incidents. They go and interview people afterwards. You usually can find one or two people like, "Oh, I just knew it was a matter of time. They've always been doing it like that over there, and we need to have the courage to be able to speak up. And it's all about creating the right environment too, because people are afraid to have those difficult conversations with people because we're afraid how they're going to react.
That's
Are
right.
they going to, get very defensive? Is there going to be some confrontation? A lot of people don't like confrontation. I get it. I'm from Minnesota. I'm very passive aggressive by nature.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. Or, will they not like me? There's
Absolutely.
that's a toughie for some
And
people.
it's about creating that culture where caring about people is the center of it. I'm not calling you out. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad or to judge you. It's because I care about you and I don't
Yeah,
want to see you get hurt.
that's
That's
right.
why I'm doing it.
You know, saying all that and making that all those intentions and expectations clear up front seems like that is just a huge piece of this. What are your thoughts on what people should do or how leaders should approach communicating things like safety measures that they need?
Yeah,
Yeah.
honestly, so it basically follows kind of how my book is outlined. It's
Yeah.
it's sort of three parts. First, you got to be able to lead yourself first. You have to be able to do the right thing yourself. If you expect anybody to follow you, you got to have your own house in order. I'm not saying you have to be a perfect leader because they don't exist. They exist
That's
only
right.
on paper. But we need to have our credibility established as leaders, and we need to be able to do the right thing ourselves. A lot of times we mirror the behavior of others around us. If I'm not
Mhm.
wearing my helmet on that landing zone, how could I expect Emmanuel to do it? But the good news, Andrea, it works for the good stuff as well. If we're exhibiting good leadership skills and behaviors, others will see that and build on it. as well. So it starts by leading yourself. And, when we talk about leading yourself, you talk about having these high levels of self-awareness and, understanding what our strengths, challenges, weaknesses, limitations might be, but also understanding how they impact those around us. And obviously, we want to have congruence between how we see ourselves and how others see us. And a lot of times I love using the example. I don't know if you're a fan or if you ever watched the TV show The Office.
Mm.
Michael Scott, the character, I ask people, say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate that guy's level of self-awareness? And it's always very, very low. People are shouting out like -2. And, because how he sees himself is a lot different than how others see him. He doesn't quite understand how he impacts those around him. And so, self-awareness is the knowledge of our strengths and limitations and how we impact people. Well, self-management is what we do about it. What do
Hmm.
we actually do with that knowledge to be able to continue to grow and develop and get better at things? Because leadership, Andrea, it's a journey. It's not a destination. It's not like
Yeah.
you read a book, you take a class, listen to a podcast. All right, you bless off. You're good to go. You're a leader now. It's a continuing journey.
What are your thoughts on when someone is becoming more self-aware and maybe they're realizing that, well, the way that I said this, it impacted people a certain way. It impacted this person a certain way. But I had to say it. It was just what I had to do, and not necessarily because of following policy, but because of that internal. This is what's real for me. So I need to express that. I need to say what I'm really thinking. And yet it has a negative impact or it hurts the relationship. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's kind of twofold. And one, it's how we deliver that message.
Mm,
I'm all about, again, people speaking up, sharing their feelings, how somebody is impacting their life. But it depends on how we deliver that message.
yeah.
If we just, somebody comes into a meeting and we crack, oh, you're always late. Okay, well, first of all, I use the word always, these exaggerated generalities. You know what? They're going to think of like the 3 times they weren't late.
Hmm.
They get defensive, and that doesn't help the situation.
Doesn't work
Maybe
with teenagers either, by the way.
no, I've got young children and I'm starting to learn that for sure. So absolutely not. Just little things. I mean, very basic communication skills. When we give that critical or developmental feedback to somebody, I like to tell people, let's focus on behaviors.
Mm,
Don't just say, hey, at that staff meeting last week, you were really rude. Okay, boom, they're going to put up that wall. They're going to get defensive. Well, what were they doing? What was
mhm.
that actual behavior? Because that makes it a lot more objective. Well, I noticed you were sort of on your phone for over half the time in that meeting. Now, they might have a reason why they're on it, and we can discuss that, but at least they can't deny that, right? Like they were on their phone and I felt like you disrespected me. It's honestly from a model out of the Center for Creative Leadership. It's called SBI. Yeah, anchoring the time in or the feedback and situation
Mhm.
instead of telling somebody, hey, at the meeting last week, well, guess what? That person had 17 meetings last week. Let's just get on the same page, focus on behavior and then the impact. If I say, you know, at the meeting last Thursday morning, I saw that you were on your phone. Guess what? Everybody felt disrespected. You know what they're going to do, Andrea? They're going to launch an investigation. They're going to find the people who could care less that they're on their phone. And,
Right.
and that feedback, that message is out the window. Talk
Mhm.
about how it impacts you. Again, we want to cut down on the defensiveness and just be able to have the open conversations. But the other fold, the other side of that is seeing feedback. Again, it's such a cliche. Feedback's a gift, but having that open mind when people do deliver that message. I never hear anybody say they don't want feedback from somebody. We all want to know. We want that feedback. We should be able to invite it in. We need to manage our emotions and our reactions, and that's one of the biggest things I think when it comes to anything leadership wise. And people ask me, what is the one thing like you would say that I could focus on that can start helping me be a more effective leader? I say manage your emotions. Being able to control those emotionally driven reactions and sort of put that pause and using a more thought out response instead. And I have a great little tip or tool for it. And it came from a former colleague of mine. Guy used to fly F-16s in the Air Force. One day he came up to me, he said, hey, what do you think one of the first things they taught me in fighter pilot training is when an alarm would go off in the cockpit? And I was like, I have no idea. You're pushing buttons, you flipping switches, call Mayday, and psh, you eject out of there. I have no idea. He said the very first thing they taught him to do is just to wind the clock because you can't break anything by winding the clock. And when you're going Mach 3 at 18,000 feet, and that alarm comes on, instead of that fear-driven reaction,
Yeah.
you're trained to wind the clock, and it makes you take that brief pause.
Hmm. Hmm.
Makes you take that brief pause and let your brain trigger more thought or response instead. And just like I remember, stop, drop, and roll, I remembered wind the clock worked wonders in my professional life and even my personal life. If my wife and I are ever having a disagreement and I want to say something, but I know I'm only dumping a little more fuel on the fire, I know I'm only probably going to make it a little bit worse. Like
Right.
I literally do this. It's just my way of reminding myself, take a breath, take a step back, re-engage, wind the clock. That's just a simple memory tool that people can use to be able to sort of take that pause.
So it's like so you're making this motion with your fingers of turning a little knob. Is it just this is a way to channel that emotion in this very moment to kind of like I've got to get it out some way, so I'm going to wind the clock? Is that what that is? I'm trying to
You
figure
know
out.
what? That's a great question, and I've never even thought about it like that. Because
Okay.
again, I'm all about people expressing their emotions in a healthy
Right,
way.
right, right.
I think one of the big things is like I just look at driving and how some people might express their emotions in
Yeah.
certain ways. And sometimes you wish you might have had that one back. And I mean, I wish I
Yeah.
went to, kind of thrown up that finger, whatever. And it's like, all right, let me just wind the clock. I know they just cut in front of me. I don't know what they got going on in their lives. I'm just gonna slow things down a little bit here.
Yeah. De-escalate. Seems
Yes.
like we could use a lot of that these days.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Yes.
Oh, I think that'd be good for all of us to just think about a little bit more. What can we de-escalate? I know that you also just talked about influencing in general, which so we have so many things in common in the things that we care about, I think. And so I'm curious what your take is on cultivating the kind of influence that's going to get engagement, that people are going to be like, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying, or they're willing to engage with whatever initiative or initiation you're taking.
Yeah, honestly, I kind of got to start at the root of how I view leadership. And I would imagine is
Yeah.
how you and many people view it is it's not a position or title.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a rank, it's not a position on an organizational chart. Like I come from the military, one of the most that's where I cut my teeth, like the best leadership laboratory in the world. And you wear your rank on your uniform every single day. Like everybody knows exactly where you are in that hierarchy of command, yet you can still find leaders at the lowest levels and they're not in charge of anything. I like to say we manage things. That might be data, processes, equipment, schedules, but you lead people. Now,
Mm-hmm.
we expect leadership out of managers,
Yeah.
but I would venture to say everybody listening right now, at one point in your career, you've had a manager who you may not consider a leader, but I bet you've known somebody who is not in a position of it because those are positions of authority and
Right.
we get compliance from them. And compliance sort of is that lowest level effort, though, right? We're doing just the bare minimum. But what a leader gets is they get discretionary effort. They get that effort that people are going to put forward, not because they have to, but because they want to. And again, that's when we lead through influence, not through our position, not through, control or notoriety or anything. And again, I think we could all say we've known people who are not in positions of authority, but yet we would definitely consider leaders
Mm.
because they have the skills and the behaviors. I oftentimes will just ask people, I say, hey, if you could build that perfect leader right now, what do you want out of them? And they say all the stuff that we already know. They're good listeners. They're empathetic. They're motivating. They're accountable. They're credible. They lead by example, honest integrity. We all know that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Guess what? None of that is exclusive to being in charge of people.
That's
It's
right.
not like you get promoted to a manager. Well, now I need you to start being empathetic. Now I'm going to need you to start being a good listener. In my opinion and in my experiences, those are things that every single person can develop with the right knowledge and the right experiences.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, when people are able to interact with others in that way, we're just better. We're all better.
everybody's better. The culture is better, the
Yeah,
organization is better, and the results come with it.
that's right. When you think about leaders missing the mark on getting compliance, on getting engagement, what are some common mistakes do you think that people make?
Yeah, there's a lot of mistakes that I think that people make. And I think one of the biggest is trying to balance those business results while still focusing on people. Again, I'm not breaking any news here. We all know that, taking care of people is important, and as far as building the culture, but yet when we think of people that might be in those positions where they have a little bit more pressure on them to still deliver business results, but also to lead people,
Mm-hmm.
that's where things can become very difficult for some people. Now, guess what? Again, not breaking any news. You can do both at the same time. We can deliver great business results and be great leaders of people at the same time. It's not like we need to, okay, you know what? We can't focus on the people for a little bit, but man, we are just going to really get some great results this next quarter, and numbers are going to go up, orders are going to go up, all this great stuff. We can have both at the same time. And it comes to, sort of having that right culture in an organization.
Right. So I'm curious if you yourself, if you have some sort of leadership philosophy or the certain values, leadership values. You talked about values in your book, I know. What are those?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I sort of break it down. The book is broken down into three parts, and so it's leading yourself, leading the team, and then building that culture of accountability. And so again, leading yourself is really about sort of that self-awareness, self-management, and cultivating that growth mindset inside yourself, where you're going to step outside your comfort zone and you're going to do things that you may not be that good at, but you're going to learn a heck of a lot from it. Or
Mm-hmm.
you're going to do something that makes you a little uncomfortable, like go ahead and write a book
Mm-hmm.
and just do things that are going to be huge growth opportunities for yourself personally. And then when I talk about, being able to lead the team, a lot of it goes with building that credibility, being able to lead by example, to being able to do the right thing yourself, to those real, communication 101. Again, I think we all know what good communication looks like. We all know what good leadership looks like. The thing is that we're inherently flawed. We're humans, and we make mistakes, and that happens. And I do as well. I mentioned earlier, leadership is a journey. It's not a destination. I facilitate and teach workshops all the time on leadership skills and behaviors, and I am not anywhere close to being a perfect leader. But I think it's being able to recognize those as learning opportunities for us to be able to sort of grow and develop and get better at. And then the third part is really trying to be able to build that culture of accountability. And a lot of that deals with, this concept known as forward looking accountability, where traditional notions of accountability are sort of rear view mirror focus. Like, somebody does something wrong and we're going to point the finger at them and they're going to get in trouble for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot like our judicial system. And that's, rightfully so for that. But forward looking accountability is taking the mindset of what I like to think, maybe an FAA investigator, maybe a plane crashes and they go out there to investigate. Their number one, mindset to going out there isn't like, we're going to find who we're going to point the finger at. They're going to get in trouble. Their number one thing, what happened? How can we immediately prevent it from happening again? And letting every single person know that needs to know. That's their number one mission. And through the process, they'll find out if there needs to be any fines, discipline, all that kind of stuff. That's going to come out. But let's find out immediately, how can we prevent this from happening? And and communicating that to every single person know that needs to know. And when I think about that, I like to say when it comes to accountability, it's not about pointing the finger at somebody. It's about pointing the thumb. It's about looking inside. During my time in the military, I learned some really hard lessons on accountability. And these stories are in the book. And they were situations where I didn't necessarily do the direct thing that led to an incident happening, right? I wasn't the one that moved this over there and then something crashed into it or whatever. But I had learned from leaders before me that it wasn't about pointing finger, about pointing thumb. I had to look inside, like, you know what? If I would have done this a little bit differently, or maybe if I would have said this, maybe that wouldn't have happened. And so when you have everybody being able to take that mindset,
Yeah.
oh man, awesome things can happen in organizations.
I love that perspective. I like that idea of forward focused accountability. It takes it becomes less punitive. Like we're going to punish people for
Right.
not being right. And instead, it looks for potential and improvement, continuous improvement, and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's learning from our mistakes and how we can continue to grow and develop and get better at it.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's great. Um, what does a service-based leader look like?
His name is John Post, actually, and I talk about him in the book. The word service-based leadership is something I think many of us have heard, and being able to meet the needs of others. And I talk about in the book. I actually had a great example of like what it actually looks like in action, not in theory. And his name is John Post, platoon leader on my first deployment to Afghanistan. The guy was just at the time a young lieutenant, just a few years out of West Point, and what he lacked in experience, though he more than made up for in his leadership behaviors. Like he's the type of guy that can sit you down and just tell you the 12 different ways you sucked at life. But you leave the conversation with a smile on your face because you
Mm,
knew he cared about you.
mm,
He wanted to see you succeed. He's going to be by you every single step of the way, giving you every single tool and resource that you need to be successful. And one of the ways that he did that was he really built authentic relationships with his soldiers. And from a safety standpoint, he really understood the research, which clearly shows the more that you know somebody, the more likely you are to watch out for them, to have their back, and to make sure that they're safe. And so when I'm talking to, organizations and clients that work in high risk industries, I tell them, look, there's value in getting to know each other at work. I'm not saying that y'all got to be best buddies and have sleepovers on the weekends, right? But there's value in developing these relationships with each other.
absolutely.
And the other thing he did was he empowered every soldier in our platoon to be able to speak up
Mm,
without that fear of repercussion, where if they're wrong, something might happen to them.
mm,
And one of the ways he really embodied that idea of meeting the needs of others is when he'd come around and he'd ask every soldier, like, what is one thing that I can help you accomplish during this deployment that's outside of the scope of what we're doing on our mission?
mm,
And for myself, I wanted to be the first for my family to ever complete any level of college. And so, I got wounded. I was medevac for 3 or 4 weeks. I was finally able to get back out to our forward operating base with my soldiers, but I still couldn't go out on any missions. I was still stitched up. I couldn't wear my body armor. I was basically just a cheerleader for them, honestly. But on that deployment, we were working exclusively with the Navy SEALs and Army Special Forces, which meant they had big budgets, which meant we had a good satellite, which meant we had fast internet. So John Post tells me about this program called eArmy U online college classes. And so I was like, oh yeah, perfect. I'm in a mud hut in the middle of nowhere, Afghanistan with a great internet connection. I'm going to start plugging away at these classes. But in order to complete these classes, I needed to have a certified proctor, basically to make sure that I wasn't cheating on my final exams. And so John fills out the trove of necessary paperwork to do that. But the guy took it a huge step forward. He paid a lot of money, like well over almost $2,000 out of his own pocket to become credentialed to actually teach college credit level courses. Any soldier out at our location that wanted them. They were little 1 and 2 credit level military science type courses that would transfer to basically any institution out there. And
mm.
he didn't have to do that. The man had enough on his plate as a platoon leader in a combat zone. But he did it because he found out that others had that same goal as well of, wanting to be able to accumulate some type of, credits for their potential education in the future.
And he saw that there was something he could do, and so he did it.
And he did it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So sometimes as a leader, you kind of you want to develop other leaders. Um, you want to develop your team. And there are times when you need to make sure that everybody has their helmet on and everybody's safe. And then there are times when maybe it's better to let people kind of flounder on their own a little bit, figure it out, find their footing on their own instead of telling them what to do. Um, what are your thoughts on that side of things? On the idea that sometimes people need a chance to it's not all going to be perfect. I don't have to pave the way and that sort of thing. But then I want them to be able to learn on their own a little bit. So what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Well, first of all, if those of us that have children, I think we know all about that, right? And there's always all these great analogies about raising children and being a leader and all this kind of stuff. Um, the military has a lot of processes and procedures that can be very black and white at times, and especially in a lot of the industries where I work with clients, where it's construction or manufacturing or energy. Some things can be pretty black and white. But what I learned in the military is that you don't always need to have somebody do things the same way that you did it. And providing them those opportunities where maybe, hey, look, maybe there are some certain constraints. You need to be within this parameter and this parameter, but however you do it in there, go ahead and knock yourself out. And finding those opportunities. Again, it's not going to be every single opportunity out there isn't going to be able to be like that. I my recommendation is you find the situations where maybe the stakes are a little bit lower at first,
Mm.
and give them those opportunities, sort of step outside of their comfort zone and do something different. Um, I like to view leadership development sort of on two different planes. And the first one is sort of that horizontal development, and that's transactional in nature. It's listening to a podcast, reading a book, going to a workshop, something like that. Maybe taking one of those a psychometric assessment, a DISC, a Hogan, Myers-Briggs, that kind of stuff. But what we really want to get to as leaders, where we really grow and develop, is what's known as vertical development. And so horizontal development, I like to use the analogy of, we're adding more water to our bottle. Vertical development is getting a bigger bottle. It's increasing our capacity, and that happens through experiences. That happens when I'm leading workshops. I tell people that happens when you're back out those doors. You're back out there and you're doing the thing and having those. And you know what? Those experiences, those chances for us to grow and develop, get outside our comfort zone, aren't always going to be handed to us. Sometimes we need to be proactive, and we need to get out there and look for them. Maybe it's you going up to your boss, say, "Hey, you know what? I'm really passionate about this topic on leadership, and I wonder if I can get like an hour with the team next month and just kind of go through a little training that I developed." I don't think they're going to say no. I mean, oh wow, that's all, or hey, I'd love to lead the staff meeting next quarter or something like that, and finding these opportunities for you to do something that maybe you haven't done before. And at the same time, as somebody that might be in a position where you have tasks that are sort of weighing you down, finding those tasks that we can delegate to somebody else. It never fails when I go to an organization. And one of the things I'm passionate about is leadership visibility, being able to be out there with the people. But, oh, I just got so much that keeps me behind the desk. I've just got so many things to do here. Okay, well, one, how big of a priority are you actually putting people over some of those things that you're doing? And two, maybe some of those things that you're doing are opportunities for somebody else to grow and develop and sort of try something a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And that's so important when you're managing or leading a team to give them those opportunities. That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I can get a really good sense of an organization or their culture when I go in, because it never fails. I go into an organization, oh, we want to give you a tour. We want to walk you around the project, around the manufacturing plant, whatever. I can get a good sense of how things are based on how people react to seeing that person out on the floor. If they look at them like they got a horn growing out of their head because they've never seen that person before, got a pretty good idea of how things are going around here.
Right.
But if they're, saying, "Hey, Bill, hey, Mike, hey, Susie, great to see you again. How was that vacation last week?" That kind of gives me an idea too of how that leadership visibility is.
Yeah. You talk about motivation. What is one of the most important things that you feel like is important for a leader to do or communicate in order to motivate others?
Yeah, I honestly, everybody's different, and what motivates me might be what different than motivates
Yeah.
you. So I don't know if Dan Pink, a great author and researcher, has a great book called Drive
Yeah.
on the art and science of motivation. And I'm honestly, I feel like I'm a student of his.
Yeah.
He's really dug into a lot of the research and a lot of the studies. And so, first of all, when I talk to people about motivation, I say, look, let's get out of the way right now. Nobody's coming into work if you're not getting paid, right? Because we talk about, is money an effective motivator?
Mm.
And a lot of people will say, yeah, of course it is. And I say, well, look, if I double what you're making now, is your performance going to increase? Are you going to all of a sudden become this better employee because you're getting more money? Or are you just going to stay at the office longer and make it seem like you're trying harder because you're getting more money? Right now, again, we're not coming into work if we're not getting paid, but it's about tapping into those intrinsic motivators. I've been in organizations where that piece of swag, that hat is worth its weight in gold for some employees. But guess what? Some others could care less about it. They're gonna chuck that thing in the Goodwill donation box because they don't want that hat. It's about knowing your people. It's about knowing what drives them. And we think about a lot of the generational differences, and we hear about the millennials and Gen Z and all this kind of stuff, and what motivates them. A lot of what drives them is opportunities for growth and development.
Yep.
Opportunities. Maybe it's sending somebody to a conference. Maybe it's being able to support some type of educational pursuit of theirs, some type of certificate program, something like that. Um, Again, it just comes down to knowing your people and what motivates them and what gets them going. A lot of organizations as well, though, they have these great recognition programs to sort of reward and recognize employees. But what I've found is a lot of times these aren't being used. They're not being leveraged in the right way. And what happens is, I was in a workshop one time, and somebody sitting down and they're telling me about this great program. Yeah, my boss, they use it, once a quarter. It's all this great stuff. Person sitting next to him has been in that company for 27 years and has never heard of it
Mm.
because their boss has never taken advantage of it. And when I mean taking advantage, I'm not saying, doing fluff stuff just to give people things, but being able to truly recognize somebody's effort. If we have organizations that have things like that in place, let's use them. Let's use them for the right reasons. And you know what? If your organization doesn't, get creative, think outside the box a little bit. I had one client, one guy that was leading a team. He had about, it was between 15 and 20 people. He went and bought in the toy section of Target a little wrestling championship belt. And once a month, he would award that belt to the highest effort, not the highest performer, the highest effort person for that month. And it was kind of a joke at first, but it started to become a pretty big deal. And they would get together once a month after work, and they would award that belt. And it just really helped sort of build that teamwork. And I mean, that cost him like $17.99 or something like that. But it was just something that, again, helped motivate his team, really kind of helped people come together. And the other thing I'll say about that is we should recognize effort more than we recognize ability.
Mm.
And that's based on research by the very smart professor out of Stanford, Carol Dweck, who did a lot of research on fixed and growth mindset. When we recognize ability only, people tend to get stuck in a fixed mindset where they're like, this is what I'm good at, and I don't want to try anything else outside of it because I might fail. Whereas when we recognize effort, again, not how good somebody is, but how hard they tried, even if they came up a little bit short, her research has shown they're more likely to take that effort and to use it and apply it for other things outside of that one task. Again, not saying you can't recognize somebody's ability. Research shows we could recognize effort a little bit more than we recognize ability.
Mm. And are your thoughts on encouraging autonomy, are they similar, or how would you expand on that? Like what do you think makes people feel more like they have the ability to do what they want to do or to take initiative and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm all about, trying to give people autonomy. And there's, many people are familiar with the situational leadership model. Ken Blanchard, a great model that's used, and it's very task dependent. But I think it's a great model or tool to be able to identify those things, and people sort of, you're measuring whether they have the ability to do something, and also if they have the willingness to do it as well. And based on that, you can sort of determine what level of autonomy you can give that person. If it's their first time doing something, they might need a little bit more sort of coaching and direction from you to be able to get going on that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, if they're a high performer and this is something they know how to do, they're willing to do it. It's like, hey, here's the keys, take it and run.
Yeah. Yeah. You were mentioning younger generation earlier, and I know you talk about purpose towards the beginning of your book. And I've noticed that a lot of the people in this young adult years, it's probably always been a little bit difficult, but it's particularly more difficult now, I think, because of just the world of possibilities that they have in front of them. They could do anything. They could pursue so many different paths, which could take so many different tangents. And they're in a market where there's a lot of need for them. So they could really take a lot of different paths and keep
Yeah.
switching paths and that sort of thing. So I think that they're struggling sometimes to find that purpose. because they care about so
Absolutely.
many different things. What kind of what advice, or what would you say to a young adult who's kind of wavering back and forth, trying to decide what path to take with their life?
Yeah. First of all, I don't care how old you are. I didn't have it figured out what I wanted to be when I grew up till I was 38.
There you
Okay.
go.
So whether you go to college or you don't go to college, you don't have to have it figured out right away. You might go down several different paths. And I encourage people to follow that purpose and to sort of follow that dream. I enlisted enlisted in the army 2 days after 9/11. I had dropped out of college. I was going to a small community college in rural Minnesota. I really wasn't going anywhere in life. I was already skipping classes the first week. 3 weeks into the first semester, 9/11 happens. 2 days later, drop out, join the army. I signed up like many people did at that time for all those patriotic reasons. But when you're in, you don't really think about that. It's just another job. You kind of wake up a little bit earlier than most people and you take longer business trips, but that's about it. And it wasn't until I got out and I'm a lazy college kid again. And I start reflecting like, I used to have such a bigger purpose in life. Like I used to be part of something so much bigger than myself. And
Mm.
now I'm sitting on this futon playing PlayStation and eating Cheetos. Like, how am I ever going to have a purpose again? And, I really struggled with that for a while, but I had to accept the fact that one, I wasn't going to totally be able to replicate that purpose I had before, that military, that service beyond myself. But it took a few different iterations of being able to find something that really motivated me and really finding that job where at first I was like, I can't believe they're paying money to do this. Like, my goodness, I'm getting over on these people because wow, I would be doing this for free if I could. And again, it takes a lot of different paths. I got out of the army. I first wanted to be a history teacher, and so I majored in history. But after about a year of doing that, I was like, oh, I don't think I want that. I want to have a little more autonomy in my life, a little bit more freedom, all that kind of stuff. And I just wasn't as passionate about it. So I ended up double majoring in history and sport management, and actually went straight in and got a master's degree in sport management. And I went to work for the Minnesota Vikings, my hometown team, working in football operations, like the team I grew up cheering for as a young kid. Anything the players and coaches needed off the field, I'm their guy, booking flights, hotels, catered meals, ticket requests, you name it, I did it. Not as glamorous as what some people might think. And it didn't take me long to realize after sort of pulling back the curtain a little bit, that's not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And so
Mm.
I had to move on from that. I had invested some time and education down that path, but I had to make that decision where I knew that's not what I wanted to do. And I sort of got into speaking and started telling my story and doing some events and was just really getting a lot of energy from doing it, of having people come up to me afterwards and talking about the impact that my message had on them, where I
Mm.
think there are a lot of things out there that when we know that feeling, like the things that really give you energy, the things that really get you out of bed where you're like, oh man, I can't wait to go into work today and do this because I love it. I can't believe they pay me money to do it. And if you can find something like that in your life, I think you're truly blessed,
Mm.
because I think a lot of people want that, but they're afraid of taking those steps. And for myself, I ended up going to work for a small leadership development firm that literally took me all over the world. Got to do a lot of cool work in China, Africa, all over Europe, all over the States. Companies range in Fortune 500, small family owned businesses. February 18th, 2020, COVID is still in its infancy as far as what we knew. I get a call saying I've been let go from that job. And I cried. My wife and I was the sole income earner for our family. I was making really good money. My wife was fortunate to be able to stay home with our two children, and we were 12 months into the adoption process.
Mm.
February 2019, my wife and I began this adoption journey. December 2019, finally, after many months, we get matched with a birth mother who's due to give birth in March of 2020. Well, at the beginning of February 2020, I'm pulling into the parking lot of a client up in Anchorage, Alaska to go do a full day leadership workshop. My wife calls me, said, hey, the adoption agency needs to talk to us. Found out the birth mother was scamming us in the agency that we're working through. So we
Uh,
lost out on 15,000 bucks, which is a lot of money, especially a couple weeks later, you lose your job. But again, I've always kind of been a glass half full kind of guy. I wasn't going to throw this pity party for too long. An hour later, I wiped my tears away. I went to the Secretary of State website. I registered a new business and I got my butt back to work. I wouldn't necessarily recommend starting a new business at the beginning of a worldwide pandemic. At the same time, I'm not unique and I'm not special. It's not like, oh, poor me, I'm the only one being impacted, right? Everybody was impacted one way or the other. And I viewed it as an opportunity. I viewed it as an opportunity. I've been grinding every single day since then to make it work. And I've really seen the fruits of that labor of love that I've been on. But I've had so many people. And so, first of all, I guess the point of that story is I never envisioned starting my own business, going out on my own. Never really like that wasn't my thing. I wasn't the kid that opened a lemonade stand, didn't have an entrepreneurial bone in my body. I was forced into it
Hmm.
and I dove headfirst in. But I have so many people like, oh, I've really got this idea. I'd like to go out in business on my own. And I was forced into it at a very bad time. We had to tap out our 401k and take out a second mortgage to survive, which we know you're not supposed to touch the 401. We know that.
Right, right.
But again, we weren't the only ones that had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't special. We weren't unique. It's about having that mindset, viewing it as an opportunity. And so I tell people like, look, if you've got that idea, go all in, head first. You're going to be fine. Look, hey, it might fail. I can't guarantee you're going to be successful, but I know you're going to learn a heck of a lot from it, and
Mm.
you'll come out on the other side a better person. There will be a job. You'll be just fine. I promise you.
Mm. Oh man, this has been a great conversation. You have a great book. I obviously you're a great speaker. I'm happy for you and your success. And I am wanting to direct people to your website or to where should people look for
Yeah,
you?
Loyalty Point Leadership is the name of the business, and you can find all about my speaking, my workshops, see some of my demo videos, all that great stuff there. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Would love to be your friend. Even if you want to talk some smack about the Vikings, that's okay. We can bring it on. No, there's a lot of football fans out there. I do want to say one last thing, Andrea. After a lot of prayerful consideration, we did continue on the adoption journey, and we
You
we
did.
brought we brought home our beautiful daughter Haven in May of 2020, just
Oh.
an absolute bright spot in our lives during those challenging times. So we got four girls, Hazelyn, Hattie, Haven, and Harper. We call them the 4-H club, right? We'll eventually have a boy. It's safe to say his name's going to start with an H if we do have one. But yeah, those are my little girls. They're why I work hard and why I work safe. And I don't care if you're married, single, or divorced. Every single one of us has somebody that cares about us, expects us home at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. That's great, Patrick. Okay, I do have one last question for you, and maybe you want to go back to something you've said before, but this is the Voice of Influence podcast. What last piece of advice would you like to give somebody who would like to have a voice of influence?
I don't care what title or position you are, you can have a voice of influence. It's not about being the boss. It's not about always being the person making the decisions. It's about being able to lead through influence, through having high levels of self-awareness, being empathetic, being credible, being accountable. Those are things that every single person can grow and develop and get better at with the right knowledge and right experiences. It's not a position on a chart.
Mm,
Everybody can lead through influence.
that's right. All right. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for being here today with us on the show. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much,
And
Andrea.
good luck with your book.
Thank you.